In 2016, Atlus released a game that left such an impact on gaming, it changed how we talked about video games. Persona 5. I remember when this game released its first trailer, and it was just 5 chairs with balls and chains around its legs. God, this was so hype. Everyone lost their minds. I had played Persona 3 FES and Persona 4, and immediately knew I was going to be buying the collector's edition for this. I love this game, and it only got better when Persona 5 Royal released. But as time has passed, and I've seen Atlus release more games, I've begun to notice that maybe Persona 5 changed things for the worse? Was Persona 5 ultimately good for Atlus? We should better define the question. Persona 5 is the most sold IP under the Megami Tensei umbrella. In fact, just total copies of Persona 5 and Royal surpasses the total sales of all of the Shin Megami Tensei series, the Devil Summoner series, the Devil Survivor series, and Persona 1 and Persona 2 Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment combined. And that does not include the sales of Persona 5 Strikers, Dancing in Starlight, or Tactica. Even the main character, Joker, has become such an iconic character that he has made an appearance in Dragon's Dogma Online, Grand Blue Fantasy, Puzzle and Dragons, Sonic Forces, Catherine Full Body, Super Smash Bros., Identity 5, AFK Arena, Dragalia Lost, Knives Out, Last Claudia, and even Astrobot.
And the game of the year is Astrobot!
The only character I can think of that has had this many crossovers is 2B from Nier, and Joker even appeared in that. The only IP that Atlus released that remotely competes in sales is Persona 4. The sheer impact of Persona 5 is immense and has been very lucrative for Atlus, so yeah, it has been a pretty good deal for Atlus and P Studio, especially for bringing new players into the Mega 10 verse. It's also likely that Persona 5 positively impacted the sales of other Mega 10 releases, especially as people who began with Persona 5 began delving into Atlus's catalog of games. And I'm proof of that. I started with Persona 4, and it eventually led me to playing games like SMT4, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, Strange Journey, and eventually to Persona 5. But financials aside, what does Persona 5 represent for the culture of gaming? Plenty of game developers have said that they love Persona 5, and clearly have been inspired by it. One of the most common phrases you may hear when describing Persona 5 is that it just oozes style. But style is not an end-all be-all, just like how good graphics doesn't make a good game. It's meant as an enhancement to an already good product. Let's take Soul Hackers 2. Soul Hackers 2 has a very cool setting with this near-futuristic cyberpunk style with humans and demons coexisting. But the game has multiple problems that prevent it from being a smash hit that no amount of style boosts would be able to cover up. Likewise, Honkai Star Rail's Divergent Universe may have the menu style of Persona 5, but you can't fool me. That's just simulated universe with a new twist. When styles supplant substance, you end up with a pile of garbage. It may be shiny, sparkly, and golden, but you still have garbage. Persona 5 was able to provide both style and substance with flashing menus that transitioned into each other, stellar combat, and jazz.
You've never heard of jazz before?
Obviously, there's a lot more to it. Persona 5 has a great story, plenty of lovable characters, plenty of activities to spend your time on. And Atlus has been able to bring a unique style to other games, such as Metaphor ReFantazio and Persona 3 Reload. But they also don't have to rely on it when making a game, such as with SMT5, which can be a very fun and challenging experience depending on how you play. And it doesn't have these flashy menus popping up in your face all the time. And while Atlus seems to understand that, game journalists and critics seem to struggle with that. Game reviewers are obsessed with Persona 5. A fun game you could play is find a game review for a JRPG or an RPG that does not mention Persona 5. I understand that Persona 5 is a good game, but come on. Probably the most infamous examples occurred when Shin Megami Tensei 5 originally released. When IGN originally reviewed the game, they included the now infamous line that the game sometimes feels like Persona without the heart. What are you talking about? One game is a turn-based game where high schoolers fight back against society and terrible adults, while the other one is literally about the apocalypse and the end of the world. We can have moments of levity and moments where the characters can have fun cracking jokes with each other. While if this happened in the other, where the characters cracked jokes and didn't take their situation seriously, you'd think it was a Marvel movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that a game cannot be compared to Persona 5, but every game? You are literally comparing Fire Emblem Three Houses to Persona 5 for having a calendar. If you want to compare battle systems, stories, characters, or themes, go ahead. I would expect you to compare Persona 5 to Persona 3 Reload. And you should. But saying you don't like Persona 3 Reload because it's not Persona 5 is ludicrous. What you are doing is cheapening the experience of some great games by reducing it to not Persona 5. And this has an effect on consumers. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Who bases their decision to buy a game on a game review? Surprisingly, a lot of people. There are plenty of people that don't just go to these gaming news publications, they go to YouTubers. They'll pull up their favorite game reviewer, look at what they have to say about a game, and they may decide based on their feedback to buy the game or not. And the people that read or listen to these reviews can decide that they don't want to play another quote-unquote Persona game, even though that's not what that is at all. Most recently, I saw a review for Metaphor Refantasio that described the game as, this game is really just Persona 5, only a cast of angsty teenage school kids has been replaced by a motley crew of humanoid anti-monarchists. Which does a disservice to a game that addresses some real issues, such as racism, classism, anxiety, and whether there is such a thing as a true utopia, or if it's just a fantasy. The obsession for Persona 5 is ridiculous. It was a fun game, dealing with teenagers who wanted freedom from the limitations of modern society. It's a relatable story. Many of us may feel trapped in our lives and dream of what ifs, like if we never had to deal with our jobs, or school, or certain people, or more. Again, I like Persona 5. It's easily one of the best games I've played, but it's not supposed to be this bar that games need to hurdle to be successful. Atlus made a great game, twice, but it has left a negative impact on how some people talk about games, and the consumer is left deceived by the true nature of those games. Atlus set a high bar for themselves when they originally released Persona 5, but not all games need to aim for that bar. Even Atlus doesn't need to always aim for that bar. They should be allowed to try new ideas without a game being labeled Persona 5 but X. Persona 5 has become this double-edged sword of great financial success and unrealistic expectations for games.